Bikers bully 93-year-old veteran, then freeze when he makes one phone call. Harold Sarge Thompson sat on the worn wooden bench outside Millie's diner, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. At 93, Sarge was a fixture in the small town of Millbrook, his stooped figure and faded veteran's cap a familiar sight to locals. His blue eyes, though clouded with age, still held a spark of the determination that had carried him through World War II and the decades that followed. Born in 1930, Sarge had lived through the Great Depression, fought in the Pacific Theater, and returned home to build a life and family in Millbrook. He had outlived his wife, Margaret, and their only son, Jack. Now he spent his days between the local VFW hall, where he regaled younger veterans with tales of his service, and Millie's diner, where he nursed cups of coffee and watched the world go by. Across the street, the Thunderhogs Motorcycle Club had recently set up shop in an abandoned garage. Led by the imposing figure of Big Mike Dawson, the club had quickly become a source of tension in the quiet town. Their loud bikes, late-night parties, and intimidating presence had many residents on edge, but none more so than Sarge. To Sarge, the bikers represented everything he had fought against: chaos, disrespect, and a disregard for the values he held dear. Each rev of their engines set his teeth on edge, reminding him of the artillery fire that still haunted his dreams. Yet, despite his distaste for the newcomers, Sarge held firm to the code of honor that had guided him through his long life: respect for others, even those you disagree with. Little did Sarge know that his path was about to collide with that of the Thunderhogs in a way that would challenge his principles and change the fabric of Millbrook forever. As he sipped his coffee, his gaze drifted to the garage across the street, where Big Mike and his crew were tinkering with their bikes. The tension in the air was palpable, a storm brewing on the horizon of this sleepy town. In that moment, as the morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street, the stage was set for a confrontation that would test the mettle of a man who had faced down armies and the bikers who thought they owned the town. Sarge's lifetime of experiences, his unwavering code of honor, and the respect he commanded in Millbrook were about to be put to the ultimate test. As Millie stepped out of the diner to refill Sarge's coffee, she noticed the furrow in his brow as he watched the bikers. "Everything all right, Sarge?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Sarge nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the garage across the street. "Just fine, Millie," he replied, his voice gravelly with age. "But I've got a feeling things are about to change around here." Little did he know just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The day that would change everything in Millbrook started like any other. Sarge made his way down Main Street, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the sidewalk. As he approached Millie's diner, the roar of motorcycles shattered the morning calm. The Thunderhogs, led by Big Mike, came tearing down the street, their bikes weaving dangerously close to pedestrians. Sarge watched with growing anger as the bikers pulled up in front of the diner, their engines revving loudly. Big Mike, a mountain of a man with a shaved head and arms covered in tattoos, dismounted his bike and strode towards the diner's entrance. As he passed Sarge, he deliberately bumped into the old veteran, nearly knocking him off balance. "Watch it, old-timer," Big Mike growled, a smirk playing on his lips. "Wouldn't want you to break a hip." Sarge steadied himself, his jaw clenched tight. "You'd do well to show some respect, son," he said, his voice low but firm. Big Mike turned, towering over Sarge. "Respect? For what? Some fossil who thinks he owns the town?" He leaned in close, his breath hot on Sarge's face. "Times are changing, Gramps. This is our turf now." The other bikers laughed, creating a wall of leather and denim behind their leader. Sarge stood his ground, his grip tightening on his cane. The tension was palpable, drawing the attention of everyone on the street. Millie burst out of the diner, her face flushed with anger. "That's enough," she shouted, positioning herself between Sarge and Big Mike. "You leave him alone, Mike. He's a war hero, for crying out loud." Big Mike sneered. "War hero? More like war relic. Why don't you go play bingo at the retirement home, old man? Leave the streets to those who can actually ride them." Sarge's eyes flashed with a fire that belied his age. "I've faced down worse than you, boy. Men who thought they could bully their way through life. They learned the hard way that true strength isn't about how loud your bike is or how big your muscles are. For a moment, something like doubt flickered in Big Mike's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by anger. He grabbed Sarge by the front of his shirt, lifting him slightly off the ground. "Listen here, you old fool." "Put him down," Millie screamed, beating her fists against Big Mike's arm. The commotion had drawn a crowd. Townspeople watched in horror as the confrontation unfolded. Some pulled out their phones recording the incident. Others looked on helplessly, too afraid to intervene. Just as it seemed Big Mike might actually harm Sarge, a siren wailed in the distance. The local sheriff's cruiser came into view, lights flashing. Big Mike released Sarge, shoving him roughly away. "This isn't over, old man," he growled. "You and this whole town better learn who's in charge now." As the bikers roared off, Sheriff Tom Riley pulled up. He rushed to Sarge's side, helping the old veteran straighten up. "You all right, Sarge? What happened here?" Sarge brushed himself off, his dignity somewhat ruffled, but his spirit unbroken. "Just a disagreement, Tom. Nothing to worry about." But the sheriff's face was grim. "This is getting out of hand, Sarge. These bikers are causing more trouble every day. I'm doing what I can, but I'm outnumbered and outgunned." Sarge nodded, his mind racing. He knew this confrontation was just the beginning. The Thunderhogs had thrown down the gauntlet, and the very soul of Millbrook was at stake. As the crowd dispersed and Millie fussed over him, checking for injuries, Sarge made a decision. He had faced tyranny before, on distant shores and bloodied battlefields. He wouldn't stand by and watch it take root in the town he loved. "Tom," he said, his voice steady and determined, "I think it's time we had a town meeting. This has gone on long enough." The sheriff nodded, relief evident on his face. "I'll spread the word, Sarge. Tonight the community center." Sarge agreed, his mind already formulating a plan. As he watched the sheriff drive off and the townspeople return to their daily routines, he knew that the battle for Millbrook had just begun. And despite his age, despite the tremor in his hands and the ache in his bones, Sarge was ready to fight once more. Little did Big Mike and his gang know they had just awakened a sleeping giant. Sarge might be old, but he was far from defeated, and he had resources that the Thunderhogs couldn't begin to imagine. As he settled back onto his bench, Sarge's hand drifted to the pocket where he kept an old, battered phone. A phone that held a number he had sworn never to use again. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and Sarge was nothing if not a man of action. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake Millbrook to its core, and at the center of it all was a 93-year-old veteran with a lifetime of battles behind him and one last war to wage. The town meeting that evening was a tense affair. The community center was packed, with concerned citizens spilling out into the parking lot. Sheriff Riley did his best to maintain order, as one resident after another stood up to voice their fears and frustrations about the Thunderhogs. Sarge sat quietly in the front row, listening intently. He had changed into his old uniform for the occasion, the medals on his chest a testament to his service and sacrifice. As the meeting wore on, it became clear that the town was divided. Some wanted to stand up to the bikers, while others feared retaliation if they took action. When it was Sarge's turn to speak, a hush fell over the crowd. He made his way slowly to the podium, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the wooden floor. As he turned to face his neighbors, his back straightened, and for a moment they saw not the old man they were used to, but the soldier he had once been. "Friends," Sarge began, his voice strong and clear, "I've seen tyranny before. I've fought against men who thought they could rule through fear and intimidation. And I'm here to tell you, we cannot let that happen in our town." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "But I also know that violence begets violence. We can't stoop to their level. We need to be smarter, more strategic." It was then that Sarge made a revelation that stunned the entire room. "What I'm about to tell you, I've never shared before. Not even with my dear Margaret, God rest her soul." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old phone. "During the war, I wasn't just a regular soldier. I was part of a special unit, one that operated in the shadows. We took on missions that others couldn't or wouldn't. And when I came home, I made a promise to leave that life behind." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sarge held up the phone. "This contains a number that could change everything. It's a direct line to some of the finest soldiers I've ever known. Men and women who have dedicated their lives to fighting injustice wherever it may be found. The revelation hung in the air, heavy with implications. Sheriff Riley stepped forward, his face a mix of awe and concern. "Sarge, are you saying what I think you're saying? You want to bring in some kind of special forces?" Sarge shook his head. "Not exactly, Tom. These aren't soldiers anymore, at least not officially. They're veterans like me, but younger, stronger. They formed a group dedicated to helping communities in need. They operate within the law, but they have resources and skills that could level the playing field against the Thunderhogs." The room erupted in a cacophony of voices. Some were excited by the prospect of expert help, while others were wary of inviting more outsiders into their town. Sarge raised his hand, calling for silence. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said, "and I understand if you have doubts, but I've lived in this town for over 70 years. I've watched children grow into adults, and their children do the same. This is our home, and it's worth fighting for." As the meeting adjourned, the townspeople left with mixed emotions. The revelation of Sarge's secret past and the potential solution he offered had given them hope, but also raised new questions and concerns. Sarge made his way slowly out of the community center, the weight of his decision heavy on his shoulders. He knew that by revealing his past and suggesting this course of action, he had set in motion events that could not be undone. As he stepped into the cool night air, he gripped the old phone tightly, knowing that the next call he made would change everything. The battle for Millbrook was about to enter a new phase, and Sarge found himself once again at the center of a storm, ready to fight for the values he held dear and the town he called home. In the quiet of his small home, Sarge sat at his kitchen table, the old phone before him like a loaded gun. The events of the town meeting played over in his mind as he wrestled with the decision that lay ahead. He knew that making this call would irrevocably change not just his life, but the lives of everyone in Millbrook. With a deep breath, Sarge picked up the phone and dialed the number he had memorized decades ago. As it rang, he felt the years fall away, memories of covert missions and brothers-in-arms flooding back. A gruff voice answered on the third ring. "Spider's Web. Verify." Sarge's response was immediate, the code phrase springing to his lips as if no time had passed. "The eagle's nest is empty, but the eaglets still fly." There was a pause, then a surprised chuckle. "Well, I'll be damned. Sarge, is that really you, old-timer?" "It's me," Hawk replied, a smile tugging at his lips despite the gravity of the situation. "I need your help." Over the next hour, Sarge laid out the situation in Millbrook. He spoke of the Thunderhogs, their intimidation tactics, and the town's growing fear. Hawk listened intently, asking pointed questions that revealed his tactical mind was as sharp as ever. "This is serious business, Sarge," Hawk said when Sarge had finished. "You're sure you want to open this can of worms? Once we're involved, there's no going back." Sarge's grip tightened on the phone. "I'm sure, Hawk. This town gave me a home when I came back from the war. It's where I built a life with Margaret, where we raised our boy. I can't stand by and watch it fall to thugs and bullies." "All right, old friend," Hawk said after a moment. "We'll be there in 48 hours. But remember, we operate within the law. We're not vigilantes." "Understood," Sarge replied. "And Hawk, thank you." As he hung up the phone, Sarge felt a mix of relief and apprehension. He had set things in motion, and now there was no turning back. The consequences of Sarge's decision began to unfold almost immediately. The next morning, as he made his way to Millie's diner, he noticed curious glances and hushed conversations following in his wake. Word of his revelation at the town meeting had spread quickly, and now his neighbors saw him in a new light. At the diner, Millie greeted him with a mix of awe and concern. "Is it true, Sarge?" she asked as she poured his coffee. "Are you really bringing in some kind of special forces?" Sarge sighed. "Not exactly, Millie. They're veterans like me, just with a different set of skills. They're coming to help, not to fight." But even as he said it, Sarge knew that conflict was inevitable. The Thunderhogs wouldn't give up their hold on the town without a struggle. His fears were confirmed later that day when Big Mike and his crew roared into town, their bikes louder and more aggressive than ever. They circled the town square, revving their engines and shouting insults at passers-by. As they passed Millie's diner, Big Mike locked eyes with Sarge, his gaze full of malice. "We heard about your little town meeting, old man," he called out. "You think bringing in your war buddies is going to scare us? We're not going anywhere." Sarge stood his ground, meeting Big Mike's glare with a steady gaze of his own. "This town isn't yours to terrorize, son. You'd do well to remember that." As the bikers roared off, leaving a cloud of exhaust and fear in their wake, Sarge felt the weight of his decision more heavily than ever. He had hoped to resolve the situation peacefully, but it was becoming clear that the Thunderhogs weren't interested in negotiation. Over the next 2 days, tension in Millbrook reached a fever pitch. The Thunderhogs increased their presence, parking their bikes in front of businesses and intimidating anyone who dared to challenge them. Sheriff Riley did his best to maintain order, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. Sarge found himself at the center of it all, a beacon of hope for some and a target for others. Many of the townspeople looked to him for guidance, while others blamed him for escalating the situation. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders, reminding him of the burden of command he had carried so many years ago. As the 48-hour mark approached, Sarge gathered a small group of trusted friends at the VFW hall. Sheriff Riley was there, along with Millie and a few other business owners who had been hit hardest by the bikers' intimidation tactics. "My friends are coming," Sarge explained, his voice low and serious. "But I need you all to understand something. These men and women are professionals. They're here to help us regain control of our town, not to start a war. We need to be smart about this." Sheriff Riley nodded, his face grim. "I appreciate the help, Sarge, but I'm worried. If this escalates into violence, it's my responsibility to maintain law and order." Sarge placed a hand on the sheriff's shoulder. "I understand, Tom, and I promise you, we'll do everything we can to resolve this peacefully. But we also need to be prepared for all possibilities." As the meeting concluded, Sarge felt the full weight of his decision. He had called upon resources from his past, potentially putting his friends in danger. He had raised the hopes of his community, and now he had to deliver on that promise. And he had set himself squarely in the crosshairs of the Thunderhogs, who saw him as the primary threat to their dominance. That night, as Sarge sat on his porch watching the sun set over Millbrook, he heard the distant rumble of motorcycles. But this time, it wasn't the Thunderhogs. A group of riders appeared on the horizon, their bikes moving in perfect formation. As they drew closer, Sarge stood, his heart pounding with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The lead rider, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, removed his helmet and approached the porch. "Sergeant Thompson," he said, snapping a crisp salute. "Hawk reporting for duty, sir." Sarge returned the salute, emotion welling up in his throat. "At ease, soldier," he said, his voice gruff with unshed tears. "And thank you for coming." As Hawk and his team dismounted, Sarge knew that the real challenge was just beginning. The consequences of his decision were about to play out in ways he couldn't fully predict. But looking at the determined faces of these veterans, men and women who had answered his call without hesitation, he felt a surge of hope. Millbrook was about to change, for better or worse. And Sarge was at the heart of it all, a 93-year-old veteran preparing to fight one last battle for the town he loved. As Sarge and Hawk's team settled into Millbrook, a secondary plot began to unfold, centered around Sheriff Tom Riley. Tom had always prided himself on being able to handle the town's problems on his own, but the arrival of the Thunderhogs had pushed him to his limits. Now, with Sarge bringing in outside help, Tom found himself grappling with feelings of inadequacy and resentment. The sheriff's struggle became apparent during a strategy meeting at the VFW hall. As Hawk laid out his team's plans for gathering intelligence on the Thunderhogs, Tom grew increasingly agitated. "Now wait just a minute," he interrupted, his face flushed. "This is still my town, and I'm still the law here. We can't just go around spying on people, even if they are troublemakers." Hawk raised an eyebrow, exchanging a glance with Sarge. "Sheriff," he said calmly, "we're not here to usurp your authority. We're here to help. But we need to understand what we're dealing with if we're going to resolve this situation peacefully." Tom's jaw clenched. "I've been sheriff in this town for 15 years. I know these people. I know how to handle things." Sarge stepped in, his voice gentle but firm. "Tom, no one's questioning your ability, but this situation is bigger than any one person. We need to work together." As the meeting continued, Tom fell into a brooding silence. Later, as he patrolled the quiet streets of Millbrook, he found himself questioning his role in the unfolding drama. Had he failed the town by not being able to handle the Thunderhogs on his own? Was he becoming obsolete in the face of Sarge's connections and Hawk's tactical expertise? These doubts were compounded when he overheard a conversation between two residents outside the grocery store. "I don't know why Sheriff Riley didn't call for help sooner," one woman said. "Maybe if he had, we wouldn't be in this mess." Her friend nodded in agreement. "I heard he's been too soft on those bikers. Maybe we need someone tougher in charge." Tom drove away, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The resident's words stung, but a part of him wondered if they were right. Had he been too lenient, too hesitant to take decisive action? As the days passed, Tom found himself torn between cooperating with Hawk's team and asserting his own authority. He alternated between grudging admiration for their efficiency and resentment of their presence. This internal conflict came to a head when Hawk's team uncovered evidence of illegal activities within the Thunderhogs' ranks. "We need to move on this, Sheriff," Hawk urged during an emergency meeting. "We have enough to start making arrests." Tom hesitated, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. "I don't know," he said. "If we move too fast, we could spark a full-out war in the streets." Sarge, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Tom," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years of experience, "sometimes the bravest thing a leader can do is accept help when it's needed. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise." As Tom looked around the room, seeing the determined faces of Hawk's team and the hopeful expressions of his fellow townspeople, he realized that Sarge was right. This wasn't about his pride or his position. It was about protecting Millbrook and its residents. With a deep breath, Tom nodded. "All right," he said, straightening his shoulders. "Let's do this. But we do it my way, by the book." Hawk grinned, extending his hand to the sheriff. "Wouldn't have it any other way, sir." As they shook hands, Tom felt a shift within himself. He wasn't just accepting help, he was becoming part of something bigger. And in that moment, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As the days passed, the dynamics between Sarge, Hawk, and the people of Millbrook began to evolve in unexpected ways. The initial wariness that had greeted Hawk and his team slowly gave way to curiosity and, in many cases, admiration. Sarge found himself acting as a bridge between the townspeople and the newcomers. He spent his mornings at Millie's diner, as always, but now he was often joined by Hawk or other members of the team. These informal gatherings became a way for the veterans to integrate into the community, sharing stories and building trust. One morning, as Sarge and Hawk sat at their usual table, Millie approached with a pot of coffee and a hesitant smile. "I hope you don't mind me asking," she said, refilling their cups, "but how do you two know each other? You seem like old friends." Sarge and Hawk exchanged a look, years of shared history passing between them in a moment. "Well, Millie," Sarge began, "Hawk here saved my life more times than I can count back in the war, and a few times since then, too." Hawk chuckled, shaking his head. "Don't let him fool you, ma'am. Sarge here is the reason any of us made it home. He was the best commander a soldier could ask for." As they shared sanitized versions of their adventures, Millie found herself drawn into their world. The easy camaraderie between the two men, despite their age difference, spoke volumes about the bonds forged in combat. Meanwhile, Sheriff Tom Riley was developing an unexpected rapport with Lisa, one of Hawk's team members. Lisa, a former military police officer, had taken it upon herself to help Tom upgrade the town's outdated law enforcement systems. At first, Tom had resisted her help, still struggling with his pride. But Lisa's no-nonsense attitude and genuine respect for his position gradually won him over. They spent long hours at the sheriff's office, poring over reports and strategizing. "You know, Tom," Lisa said one evening as they reviewed security footage, "you've done an incredible job keeping this town safe with the resources you had. Don't sell yourself short." Tom looked at her, surprised by the compliment. "I appreciate that, Lisa. I just wish I could have handled the Thunderhogs on my own." Lisa shook her head. Sometimes the smartest thing a leader can do is recognize when they need backup. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Her words echoed Sarge's earlier sentiment, and Tom felt something shift inside him. He was beginning to see the value of collaboration, of combining his deep knowledge of Millbrook with the specialized skills Hawk's team brought to the table. As for the townspeople, their relationship with Sarge deepened as they saw him in a new light. The quiet, unassuming veteran they had known for years was revealed to be a man of hidden depths and unexpected connections. Young Jimmy, the paperboy who had always been fascinated by Sarge's war stories, now looked at him with awe. "Is it true you were some kind of secret agent, Sarge?" he asked one morning as he delivered the paper. Sarge chuckled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Not exactly, Jimmy, but I did my part, just like every other soldier. And now we're doing our part for Millbrook." The boy's eyes shone with admiration. "When I grow up, I want to be brave like you, Sarge." Sarge's expression softened. "Bravery comes in many forms, Jimmy. Standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, that's true courage." These interactions, repeated throughout the town, began to change the atmosphere in Millbrook. The fear that had gripped the community since the arrival of the Thunderhogs was gradually replaced by a sense of unity and purpose. Even some of the younger members of the Thunderhogs found themselves impacted by the presence of Hawk's team. A few of them, disillusioned with the gang's increasingly aggressive tactics, began to see the veterans as a potential way out. One such member, a young man named Tyler, approached Hawk after observing the team's training session in the park. How does someone join the military?" he asked hesitantly. "Asking for a friend, you know?" Hawk, recognizing the look in the young man's eyes, took the time to talk with him, offering a glimpse of a different kind of brotherhood than the one Tyler had found with the Thunderhogs. As these relationships developed and deepened, the stage was being set for the confrontation that everyone knew was coming. But now, instead of a town divided and afraid, Millbrook was becoming a community united, ready to stand together against the threat that had plagued them for too long. Sarge watched these changes with a mixture of pride and apprehension. He knew that the real test was still to come, but seeing the town he loved coming together gave him hope. Whatever happened next, they would face it as one. The tension that had been building in Millbrook for weeks finally reached its breaking point on a warm Saturday afternoon. The Thunderhogs, led by Big Mike, roared into town in full force, their bikes forming a menacing convoy down Main Street. It was clear from their aggressive demeanor that they were looking for a fight. Sarge, who had been meeting with Hawk and Sheriff Riley at the diner, stepped out onto the sidewalk as the bikers approached. Behind him, the townspeople began to gather, a mix of fear and determination on their faces. Big Mike brought his bike to a stop directly in front of Sarge, the engine's rumble filling the air. Well, he sneered, removing his helmet. "If it isn't the old-timer and his rent-a-cops, you boys playing soldier again?" Hawk stepped forward, his posture relaxed but alert. "We're not here to play anything, friend. We're here to keep the peace." Big Mike's eyes narrowed. "Peace? There was peace before you showed up. This is our town now, and it's time you all learned that." As if on cue, the Thunderhogs began to spread out, surrounding the growing crowd of townspeople. The tension in the air was palpable, like electricity before a storm. Sarge's voice cut through the noise, calm and steady. "This town doesn't belong to you, son. It belongs to the people who live here, who've built their lives here. We're not looking for trouble, but we're not going to stand by and let you bully good folks anymore." Big Mike's face contorted with rage. He revved his engine, the sudden noise causing some in the crowd to flinch. "You think you can stop us, old man? You and what army?" It was at that moment that Hawk's team made their presence known. They emerged from various points around the square, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Though they were outnumbered by the bikers, their calm confidence was evident. The Thunderhogs, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of these trained veterans, began to look uncertain. Some of them exchanged nervous glances, clearly reconsidering their bravado. Big Mike, however, was not so easily deterred. With a roar of frustration, he gunned his engine and drove his bike directly at Sarge. The crowd gasped, but Sarge stood his ground, his eyes locked on the approaching biker. Just as it seemed Big Mike would run him down, Hawk moved with lightning speed. He stepped in front of Sarge, his hand shooting out to grab the handlebars of Big Mike's bike. With a twist of his wrist, he sent the bike skidding sideways, dumping Big Mike unceremoniously onto the pavement. The square erupted into chaos. Some of the Thunder Hogs tried to rush to their leader's aid, while others turned to flee. Hawk's team moved swiftly, their training evident as they neutralized threats without unnecessary violence. In the midst of the melee, Sarge's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Enough!" The fighting paused, all eyes turning to the old veteran. Sarge stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the scene before him. "This ends now," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "We can either tear this town apart, or we can find a way to live together. The choice is yours." As the dust settled, Big Mike struggled to his feet, his earlier bravado replaced by a look of defeat. Sheriff Riley stepped forward, handcuffs at the ready. "Michael Dawson," he said formally, "you're under arrest for assault, intimidation, and disturbing the peace." As Big Mike was led away, the remaining Thunder Hogs found themselves surrounded by a united front of townspeople and veterans. The message was clear. Millbrook would no longer be a place where bullies could thrive. The climactic confrontation had come to a head, and in its wake, the future of Millbrook hung in the balance. The actions taken in the next few moments would determine whether the town would descend further into chaos or find a path towards healing and unity. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Millbrook found itself at a crossroads. The arrest of Big Mike and several other key members of the Thunder Hogs had left a power vacuum, and tensions remained high. Sarge, Hawk, and Sheriff Riley knew that simply removing the troublemakers wouldn't be enough. They needed to address the root causes of the conflict and find a way to bring the community together. In the days that followed, a series of town hall meetings were held at the community center. These gatherings were unlike anything Millbrook had seen before. Sarge insisted that everyone be given a chance to speak, including the remaining members of the Thunder Hogs who hadn't been arrested. At the first meeting, the atmosphere was tense. Angry residents demanded that all the bikers be run out of town, while some of the younger Thunder Hogs members argued that they had as much right to be there as anyone else. Sarge stood at the podium, his presence commanding respect even from those who disagreed with him. "I've seen what happens when people let anger and fear drive their decisions," he said, his voice steady. "It never ends well. We have an opportunity here to do something different, to find a solution that works for everyone." Hawk and his team had positioned themselves around the room, ready to intervene if things got out of hand. But it was Sheriff Riley who stepped up next, surprising many with his words. "Folks," he began, "I know I've let you down in the past by not dealing with this situation sooner. But Sarge is right. Running people out of town isn't the answer. We need to find a way to coexist." Over the next few hours, a tentative dialogue began. Residents voiced their grievances about the noise and intimidation they'd experienced. In turn, some of the younger bikers spoke about feeling unwelcome in the town, of having nowhere else to go. One of the Thunder Hogs, a young man named Tyler who had previously approached Hawk about joining the military, stood up. "Look," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "I know we've caused trouble, but not all of us are bad people. Some of us just got caught up with the wrong crowd. If you give us a chance, maybe we could do something to make things right." His words seemed to shift the energy in the room. Millie, who had been watching silently, spoke up. "What if we found a way for you boys to contribute to the community? Lord knows we could use some strong young backs to help with the town cleanup and maintenance." This suggestion sparked a series of proposals. The owner of the local mechanic shop offered to take on some of the bikers as apprentices. The high school principal suggested a mentorship program, pairing the younger Thunder Hogs with students interested in mechanics and engineering. As the meeting progressed, Sarge watched with a mixture of pride and hope. He saw the beginnings of understanding starting to form, the first tentative steps towards reconciliation. Over the next few weeks, a series of initiatives were put into place. A committee was formed to establish guidelines for motorcycle noise and group rides. The Thunderhogs were given a designated area on the outskirts of town where they could work on their bikes without disturbing residents. In return, they agreed to participate in community service projects and abide by the new rules. Hawk and his team played a crucial role in this transition. They worked with the remaining Thunderhogs, offering guidance and structure. Some of the veterans even shared their own stories of struggling to fit in after returning from service, building a bridge of understanding with the bikers. Not everything went smoothly, of course. There were setbacks and moments of tension. Some residents remained skeptical, and a few of the more hardcore Thunderhogs resisted the changes. But slowly, incrementally, progress was made. One of the most significant moments came when Tyler, the young biker who had spoken up at the town hall, enlisted in the army with Hawk's help. His decision inspired several other Thunderhogs to consider military service or vocational training. Sarge found himself at the center of these efforts, often mediating disputes and offering words of wisdom. His lifetime of experience, both in war and in peace, gave him a unique perspective that resonated with both sides. As the weeks turned into months, the atmosphere in Millbrook began to change. The roar of motorcycles was still heard, but it no longer carried the menace it once did. The Thunderhogs, much reduced in number and reformed in purpose, began to be seen as a part of the community rather than a threat to it. The conflict resolution wasn't perfect, and challenges remained, but the town had taken significant steps towards healing the rift that had threatened to tear it apart. Sarge, watching the changes unfold, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had faced down bullies once again, not with fists or weapons, but with wisdom, compassion, and the strength of a united community. As the summer drew to a close, Millbrook prepared for its annual Labor Day picnic. For the first time in years, members of the Thunderhogs were invited to participate. The sight of leather-clad bikers helping to set up tables and grills alongside longtime residents was a powerful symbol of how far the town had come. Sarge sat on his usual bench, watching the preparations with a smile. Hawk approached, taking a seat beside him. "You've done good here, old friend," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. Sarge shook his head. "We've done good," he corrected. "All of us, together." As they sat in companionable silence, both men knew that while the immediate crisis had passed, the real work of maintaining peace and understanding was ongoing. But for now, in this moment, they could enjoy the fruits of their labor and the promise of a brighter future for Millbrook. The Labor Day picnic marked a turning point for Millbrook. As residents and former Thunderhogs mingled, sharing food and conversation, there was a palpable sense of a new chapter beginning. The event wasn't just a celebration of the end of summer, but a celebration of the town's resilience and ability to overcome division. Sarge, seated at a table of honor with Hawk, Sheriff Riley, and other key figures who had helped navigate the crisis, found himself reflecting on the journey they had all taken. He watched as Tyler, now in his army uniform home on leave, chatted animatedly with some of his former gang members about his experiences in basic training. As the evening wore on, Mayor Johnson approached the microphone set up near the bandstand. "Folks," he began, his voice carrying across the park, "I think we all know that this past year has been one of the most challenging in Millbrook's history. But it's also been one of the most transformative." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The mayor continued, "We've learned a lot about ourselves, about the power of community, and about the importance of understanding one another. And I think it's time we took what we've learned and used it to shape our future." He went on to outline a series of proposals aimed at fostering continued growth and unity in Millbrook. These included expanding the mentorship program, started with the Thunderhogs, to other at-risk youth, establishing a community mediation center to help resolve disputes peacefully, and creating a veteran support network inspired by Hawk's team. But most importantly, the mayor said, his gaze finding Sarge in the crowd, "We're going to establish the Millbrook Community Council, a group of citizens from all walks of life who will work together to address the challenges our town faces. And I can think of no one better to lead this council than the man who showed us all what true leadership looks like, Sergeant Harold Thompson." The crowd erupted in applause as Sarge, stunned by the announcement, was gently urged to his feet by Hawk. As he made his way to the stage, supported by his cane but standing tall, the applause grew into a standing ovation. Taking the microphone with a slightly trembling hand, Sarge looked out over the faces of his friends and neighbors. "I'm honored," he said simply, his voice thick with emotion. "And I promise you, as long as I have breath in my body, I'll keep fighting for this town and for all of you." As the cheers washed over him, Sarge knew that this was more than just a personal honor. It was a symbol of Millbrook's new direction, a commitment to facing challenges together and building a stronger, more united community. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with the lessons they'd learned and the bonds they'd forged, Sarge was confident that Millbrook was ready for whatever the future might bring. In the months that followed the Labor Day picnic, Millbrook settled into a new rhythm. The Millbrook Community Council, under Sarge's leadership, became a driving force for positive change in the town. As winter gave way to spring, Sarge found himself reflecting on the incredible journey of the past year. Sitting on his porch one mild evening, a warm breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers, Sarge marveled at how much had changed, not just in the town, but in himself. At 94, he had discovered reserves of strength and leadership he thought had long since faded. The crisis with the Thunderhogs had awakened something in him, reminding him that one is never too old to make a difference. He thought about the growth he'd witnessed in others. Sheriff Riley, once defensive and insecure, had become a strong partner in the community's transformation. The sheriff had learned to collaborate, to admit when he needed help, and in doing so, had become a more effective leader than ever before. Young Tyler, the former Thunderhog turned soldier, had written to Sarge recently. His letter spoke of the discipline and purpose he'd found in the Army, and how he hoped to use his experiences to help other young people in Millbrook find their way. Even some of the die-hard Thunderhogs, who had resisted change initially, had shown remarkable growth. Several had become valuable members of the community, their mechanical skills and strength put to use in ways that benefited everyone. Sarge's reflections were interrupted by the arrival of Hawk, who had decided to make Millbrook his home after retiring from his security work. "Penny for your thoughts, old friend?" Hawk asked, settling into the chair next to Sarge. "Just thinking about how far we've all come," Sarge replied, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "You know, when I made that call to you, I thought I was just trying to save the town. I never imagined how much it would change all of us." Hawk nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's the thing about facing challenges head-on. It doesn't just solve the problem, it transforms the people involved." As they sat in companionable silence, Sarge reflected on his own transformation. He had rediscovered his voice, his ability to inspire and lead. But more than that, he had learned the power of bringing people together, of finding common ground in the most unlikely places. "You know," Sarge said after a while, "I used to think that my fighting days were long behind me, that all I had left were memories and regrets. But this past year has taught me that there are many ways to fight for what's right. Sometimes the toughest battles are won with words and understanding, not fists or bullets." Hawk smiled, raising his coffee mug in a toast. "To new battles and old warriors," he said. Sarge clinked his mug against Hawk's, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the journey he'd been on and the growth he'd experienced. He knew that there would be more challenges ahead. The work of maintaining peace and fostering understanding was never truly finished. But he also knew that Millbrook was stronger now, more united, and better equipped to face whatever the future might bring. As the sun set over Millbrook, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Sarge felt a profound sense of peace. He had found a new purpose in his twilight years, one that allowed him to continue serving the community he loved. And in doing so, he had not just changed the town, he had changed himself, proving that growth and new beginnings were possible at any age. As summer returned to Millbrook, the town prepared to celebrate its bicentennial. The event was more than just a marking of time. It was a celebration of the community's resilience and transformation over the past year. Sarge, now 94, stood at the podium in the town square, looking out over the gathered crowd. Faces old and young, longtime residents and newcomers, even a group of reformed Thunderhogs turned community volunteers. All were united in this moment. 200 years is a long time, Sarge began, his voice strong despite his age. This town has seen wars, depressions, and more than its share of challenges. But I don't think I've ever been prouder of Millbrook than I am today. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. We've learned that true strength isn't about dominating others or imposing our will. It's about coming together, finding common ground, and working towards a shared future. We've learned that it's never too late to change, to grow, to become better versions of ourselves. As Sarge concluded his speech, the themes that had defined Millbrook's journey resonated clearly. The power of community to overcome adversity, the importance of understanding and empathy in resolving conflicts, the potential for growth and change at any stage of life. The crowd erupted in applause, and as Sarge looked out over the sea of smiling faces, he felt a profound sense of hope for the future. Millbrook had faced its demons and emerged stronger, more united. And in doing so, it had become a beacon of what was possible when people chose understanding over division, courage over fear. As the celebration continued around him, Sarge knew that the lessons learned would guide Millbrook and its residents for generations to come.